Hello everyone, in this video we will be doing the part 3 of ACCA F2 Sources of Data. This is the chapter number 10. This is the part 3 of the video, so before watching this make sure that you have checked the part 1 and 2 of the video of the chapter. In case you haven't, then I've linked it in the description box below. I've linked all the playlists in the description box below, so make sure to check them out. Okay, so now we come to the most important part in this chapter, and that is the sampling. So we will be talking about what sampling is, and we will be talking about what are the methods of sampling and what are the different ways of sampling. So the purpose of sampling is to gain as much information as possible about the population by observing only a small proportion of that population. So if I have to conduct a research using sampling methodology, then what will I do? Out of the entire population, I will pick a sample from the population and I will conduct my research on them. So that is what is known as sampling. I choose a sample from the population and I conduct my research on them. The term population is used to mean all its items under consideration of a particular inquiry. So what do I mean by population? See, for example, if I have let's say I have a, let me take an easier example. Okay, I have online tuitions. I have tuition classes business, just giving you an example. And now I would like to inquire from the students that what exactly do they require from me. I want to inquire, is it possible for me to go and ask every single student in this entire world? Is that possible? That I go and take the feedback or I go and take the review of every single student in the entire world, because they are my target audience. But that is not possible, right? Out of my entire target audience, I can only maybe talk to 10 people, 20 people, 30, 50, max to max 100 people, right? So what is that? That is my sample. Out of the entire pool of students, I have done the sampling with a particular sample, which is probably 50 people out of the millions of students. So that is what is known as sampling. A sample is a group of items drawn from the population. The population may consist of items such as metal bars, invoices, packets of tea. It need not be people. So the same way we saw people, so the same way it can be in the form of non-living items as well. Okay? In order to ascertain which television program are most popular, a sample of total viewing public is interviewed, and based on their replies, the programs can be listed. So I cannot go and talk to every person in this world who is watching TV, right? I can only talk to a couple of them. So that is what they are trying to explain over here. During the quality control procedures in a manufacturing business, a sample of a product is taken for testing. So you know that whenever a company manufactures something, 1-2 random items are picked for quality testing. You can't test every single product, right? So they test in the middle. They just pick up a random manufacturing product and test it. There are many reasons. There are 3 main reasons why sampling is necessary. Okay. So why is sampling necessary? Whole population may not be known. So we might not know what the entire population is. Even if the population is known, the process of testing every item can be extremely costly in time and money. For example, gaining information about the popularity of TV programs by interviewing every viewer. We discussed this, that it is not humanly possible to do that, right? The items being tested may be completely destroyed in the process. For example, in order to check the lifetime of an electric bulb, it is necessary to leave the bulb burning until it breaks and is of no further use. Right? So sometimes when you test something, when you test a product, that means you are using the product. Now I can't sell the electric bulb after using it, right? So in some cases when you're doing sampling, then the entire product might be destroyed. The characteristics of a population can be ascertained by investigating only a sample of the population provided that the following 2 rules are observed. The sample must be of a certain size. In general terms, the larger the sample, the more reliable the results will be. Obviously, if my sample is large enough, then only I will be able to rely on it and measure it properly and be confident about it. The sample must be chosen in such a way that it's representative of the population. So I need to make sure that whatever sample I'm choosing, it is of my um, population which I require. There are several methods of obtaining a sample and considered in turn. So now we are going to see the various methods of sampling. So let's see this quickly. So what are the different ways of sampling? Types of sampling. So the first thing is a random sampling, 1, systematic sampling, 2, cluster sampling, 3, quota sampling, 4, stratified sampling, and multi-staged sampling. So it's very important for us to understand each and every sampling method, because we will be getting questions in which we need to identify the type of sampling which has been used. Alright, so let's begin with random sampling. So what do you understand by the word random? Something which is done randomly, right? Random. What do you understand by random? Like without any decision or without any thinking, you are just randomly picking out any one of the following, right? So that is what is known as random. A simple random sample is defined as a sample taken in such a way that every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. So if there are 5 students and I want to pick one of them, I just close my eyes and pick one person. So in that way, every single student has an equal opportunity of being picked, right? So everyone has equal probability of being picked. So that is what is known as random sampling. When you're picking someone randomly, then everybody in the population gets an equal opportunity to be picked. If a 10% sample of a population of 200 items is required, then the sample size needs to be 20 items, right? 10% of 200. Numbers from a table of random numbers can be taken and the corresponding items are extracted from the population to form the sample. So if I want to, so if I work as an audit manager in a company, I am working as an audit person in a firm, right? So now I want to check if the invoices are all legit, if I want to check whether the invoices are trustworthy, and if everything in this company is being done on an ethical basis and all the invoices are correct. Now there are, let's say, 100 invoices for a month and I need to check. I can't keep sitting and checking every single invoice and like see if it's correct, right? So in that method I can use the method of, in that situation I can use the method of random sampling. So what do I mean by random sampling? I pick out any random 30 invoices, let's say, and then I check them. So if there is any fraud, error, anything of that sort in that sample, then I will assume that yeah, something has been done which is unethical, otherwise nothing. So that is what they mean by selecting a sample of invoices for an audit. Since the invoices are already numbered, this method can be applied with minimum of difficulty. This method has obvious limitations when either the population is extremely large or not known. The following methods are more applicable. Alright, so now you understood what random sampling is, randomly picking a particular thing. Now we come to systematic sampling. So what do you understand by systematic? When I talk about systematic, it is something which is done based on a procedure. So in a procedural way, everything is carried out. So systematic sampling is a technique for creating a random sample in which each piece of data is chosen at a fixed interval for inclusion in the sample. Okay. So systematic sampling is a technique for creating a random sample in which each piece of data is chosen at a fixed interval for inclusion in the sample. Now, what did you understand by this? What did we see in random sampling? We saw that every person in the population has an equal opportunity of being selected. But in this systematic sampling, what happens is that everybody, there's in a particular time interval. So there is something which is a time interval which is taken into consideration in the place of systematic. Let's see the example, then you'll be able to understand. If the population is known to contain 50,000 items and a sample of size 500 is required, then 1 in every 100 items is selected. So in every 100 items, I'm selecting one. In the next 100 items, I'm selecting one. In the next 100 items, I'm selecting one. So now if you think about it, it is done in a procedural manner, but it is still random, right? It is still random because you are not deciding whom exactly you want to pick. You are just saying that one in every 100, one in every 100, you're going to pick like that until you get your desired number of samples. So now what is the difference between random and systematic? In random, you are just randomly picking how many ever you want, however you want. There is no system using which you are picking the random sample. But in the systematic, what are you doing is that you are picking a random sample, but you are picking the random sample in a systematic manner. Okay. So the first item is determined by choosing a random number between 1 to 100. Okay, so again, this is the APGP concept, arithmetic progression. Now again, even that is done on a regular interval, right? On a systematic sampling. Strictly speaking, systematic sampling is also called quasi-random. Okay, see, think about it again. Systematic sampling in a way is the random method only, right? So that it's also known as the quasi-random. So whenever in the question you have the term quasi-random, it is nothing but it is systematic sampling only. However, it gives a very close approximation to random sampling and it is very widely used. There is a danger of bias if the population has repetitive structure. For example, if a street has 5 types of houses arranged in the order A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, an interviewer visiting every fifth home would only visit one type of the house. See, now if the data is completely random, like it doesn't have repetitive things, then it would be okay. But let's say I have a society and it has rows like this, and in every row I have A, B, C, D types of house. So A is a, let's say, 1 floor house, B is a 2 floor house, C is a 3 floor house, and D is a villa. These are the types of houses in every row. Now if I'm going to do systematic or the quasi random sampling method here, and if I'm going to pick every fourth in every row, then in the first row I'm picking D, in the second row I'm picking D, in the third row also I'm picking D, fourth also I'm picking D, because fourth in every row is always going to be villa. So do you think that is going to give me accurate results? No, because then I am ignoring A, B, C, even they are the different types of houses. So this is the limitation of systematic sampling. Okay, so now we saw what random sampling is and we saw what quasi-random or systematic sampling is. Now we will be moving on to stratified sampling. What do you understand by the word stratified? So stratified is basically one over the other. A stratified sample is made up of different layers or groups of the population. The sample size of each layer is proportional to the size of the layer and is known as sampling with probability proportional to size. Okay, again, stratified means one over the other. So, one over the other. This is something which we can even refer to as layers. So, we have layers over it. Okay, so the sample size of each layer is proportional to the size of the layer. So let's say first layer has one set of people, second layer has two sets of people, third layer has three sets of people. So that is how stratified sampling is. So with each layer, it is going, the number of the samples used in the layer is also proportional to the level which they are in. Okay, okay, let's see the example of stratified sampling. Illustration 2. A sample of 200 people is required to investigate leisure habits in relation to age. Read it again. A sample of 200 people is required to investigate leisure habits in the relation to age. So you want to know what are the leisure activities performed by people in relation to their age and stuff. 20% of the population are over 60, 65% between 18 and 60, 15% are under 18. So the sample of 200 people, how are you going to do it? Think about it for a second. So it's always going to be based on the layer. You need to have an equal proportion. So in stratified sampling, what their main aim is that you need to have an equal proportion of each layer. So you see that you have 20% of population, right? So out of 200, 20% is going to be people who are 60 years, and out of 200, 65% are the people between 18 and 60, and again out of 200, the last 15% is going to be under 18. That is what is stratified sampling. I hope you got the concept. This method ensures that a representative cross-section of the strata in the population is obtained, which may not be in the case with a random or a whole population. So when you're doing a random and a whole population, we cannot ensure that every type of people have a equal proportion, right? Because it is random. So in stratified sampling method, that is something which is ensured. This method is often used by auditors to choose a sample to confirm receivable balances in case greater proportion of larger balances be selected. Now we have what is called the multi-stage sampling. Would you understand by multi-stage? This method is often applied if the population is particularly large. For example, selecting a sample for a national opinion poll of the type carried out prior to selecting an opinion poll to general election. Okay, so when you want to pick up a sample before the general election, how are you going to do that? So now these are the things which come under the multi-stage sampling. The country is divided into areas and a random sample is taken. Each area is subdivided into towns and cities, and then again in the towns will be bifurcated, and from each road a random sample is taken. So you are basically bifurcating the entire sample into more and more and more divisions. So that is what is known as multi-stage sampling. So I hope you understood the difference between multi-stage and stratified. Stratified is just equal proportions from every that, and multi-stage is when you are bifurcating the sample into more sections. Okay, now we have what is the cluster sampling. What do you understand by cluster? Cluster is like a group, right? I hope you know that. This method is simple to the multi-stage sample, but the final step is all items as a cluster. In many ways, it is simpler and less costly. Okay, so now what is the difference between cluster and multi-stage? The last step of multi-stage involves a random sample of houses taken from the last row. But when we're talking about cluster, the last final stage is always done in a group. So that is the difference between cluster and multi-stage. Alright, now we come to the last form of sampling, which is the quota sampling. Quota. What is quota? With quota sampling, the interviewer will be given a list comprising of different types of people to be questions and the number or quota. So this is a particular quota or a particular, what do you say, a segment of people, right? So you are already predetermined and you are already given a particular segment of people and you are supposed to collect sample from that. For example, 20 males who are manual laborers, 15 females not working, 10 males professional men. So this is how you need on a particular quota basis. The interviewer can use any method to obtain such people until the various quotas are filled. This is very similar to stratified sampling, but no attempt is made to select respondents by a proper random method. The sample may be very biased. So whenever you are using a quota, the sample is not random, it can be biased in nature. Alright, so let's quickly go over and revise the sampling methods which we saw. First we saw a random method, and what is random method? You just randomly pick out anybody. And then we have what systematic is. Systematic or the quasi-random is again a random method, but you pick them in a regular interval. Now we have what cluster method is. Before cluster we saw stratified. Now what is stratified? When we have multiple layers and we choose every layer is proportional, right? Then we have cluster. Wait, after stratified we have multi-staged. Okay, what was multi-staged? We had segmented our sample into more and more deeper, and on the last and final stage you basically randomly choose people. But then what is the difference in cluster? Cluster is like stratified only, sorry, cluster is like multi-staged only, but in the last step you basically assess a group. What is quota? Quota is when we are doing segmenting like the particular quotas. So I hope you now know the forms of sampling. Okay, now let's compare the sampling method. The objective of a sample is to collect data upon an opinion and can be formed and a conclusion drawn in respect of the population. Ideally, the sample would have been chosen at a random. So unfortunately, costs. So there are very high costs whenever you're doing sampling. Truly random sampling can be have been outlined. They all concerned with minimizing cost. So there are limitations as well as positives of every form of sampling, right? Some are expensive, but they are very valid, verifiable. Some are very cheap, but they are not giving us actual results. In order to use alternatives, it is often necessary to have some knowledge of the population. Systematic sampling should not be used if the population follows a repetitive plan. So, the houses example which we saw. Quota sampling must be used with caution. The data collector may introduce bias because of how they choose to fill the quota. Let's go ahead with our test your understandings now. Now think about it and answer it. The essence of systematic sampling is that each element of the population has an equal chance of being chosen. Members of various strata are selected by the interviewers. Every nth member of the population is selected. C is my answer. You know that this is the definition of our systematic sample. We know that systematic sample is something which is done at a regular interval. So keep that in your mind now. A sample is taken by dividing the population into different age bands and then sampling randomly from the bands in proportion to its size. This is stratified random. We know that. In proportion to size. In proportion was always stratified. See, if you have listened to me properly, then these questions are really simple. A large company wants to survey the opinions of employees using cluster sampling. Which of the following methods should be used? Staff are randomly selected from each department in proportion to departmental size. Staff are selected taking a sample which is appropriate composition in terms of gender, age, and departments take appropriate staff. One department is selected and the staff and the departments are surveyed. What's the answer? D. You remember what cluster was? It is just like multi-stage sampling. The last stage or the last step involved choosing a group. So one department is selected. That's nice. We are done with this. Let's do 5 now. Associate with each of the following sampling methods A to F appropriate. Okay. So you just have to match this with this. We'll do that. Take a moment and do it, and then you can discuss with me. One city is chosen at a random from all cities in the United Kingdom. Then the electoral register is used to select one per 1000 sample. Okay. One city is chosen at a random from all cities. Then an electoral register is used to this. So how is this? Multi-stage sample, right? This is the definition of multi-stage sample. Name picked from a hat. Names picked from a hat. Very random. Every 10th person is chosen randomly from each ward in a hospital. Every 10th person is picked randomly from each ward in a hospital. What do you understand? Think about it again. Take a moment and try to come up with the answer, then I'll discuss. Every 10th person is chosen randomly from each ward. So with every proportion you are seeing, right? So this is going to be my stratified. One secondary school in a town is selected at a random, and every pupil in the school is surveyed. Every pupil in the school is surveyed. What do you think about this? Cluster. 1 person in 10 is chosen in the alphabetical list of employees. Systematic. People are stopped in the street according to instructions such as stop equal numbers of men and women. So this is a quota. A particular criteria is given. I hope you got it. Okay. Now we come to the last topic in the chapter, which is the big data. We already know what big data is, so there's not much of discussion in this portion, but we'll simply just go through it. So we know what big data is, but let's still just go and see what the exact book definition of big data is. Extremely large collections of data that may be analyzed to reveal patterns, trends, and associations. Data collection so large that conventional methods of storing and processing will not work. So, like we discussed in the starting of the chapter, our phone keeps all the information with it. So, if you have you ever googled about some particular product and suddenly on YouTube you start seeing the ads of that which you searched, so stuff like this is always stored in the memory of your phone. So, a large information is stored in your phone. So, that is what is known as the big data. Big data is a big buzzword at the moment, and some say that it will be even bigger than the internet. The ability to harness these vast amounts of data will transform our ability to understand the world and will lead to huge advances. So, you know that because of this big data and because of all this, we will be able to understand customer behavior better. We will be able to foil terrorist attacks. We will be able to prevent diseases and pinpointing market efforts. So, how does a supermarket use the big data? A supermarket is able to take the data from your past buying patterns, right? And your mobile phone location, social media, and everything. So, according to what you purchased, it will be sending you messages regarding offers on the products which you have purchased in the past, right? It will have used the data to determine if you have bought such items before, which would indicate that you own a barbecue. If the weather is nice, if you are within 3 miles of one of their stores, then they will have a barbecue food in stock. So that is how a supermarket is going to use big data for its benefit. Now we come to the 5 V's. What are the 5 V's? Volume, variety, velocity, value, and veracity. Let's go ahead. Now, what do you understand by volume? Volume means a large number of transactions or a large volume or many people who are interested. Organization now hold huge volumes of data. A supermarket will have a data of all purchases made, when the purchase has been made, where the purchase has been made, how much they have made. So all that is stored, right? And an online retailer will have the data of every product looked and bought and every page visited. So all that, what you browse, that will always be stored by an online retailer. Next time when you open the app, they are going to show you, do you want to add this product in your cart? They know that you like that product because you have browsed for it before. Mobile phone providers will have a data store of texts, voicemails, browsing habits, and location. Social media companies like Facebook will have a data of all the postings an individual makes, right? All of this is also, we are always providing this information to the Facebook and other social media platforms. So that is what is known as volume, and there is a huge volume of the data or information that is stored. Now we have something which is the variety. What is variety? Variety means variations, diversity. We are talking about diversity. So big data can include much more than simply financial information, and it can include other organizational data, which is operation in external and internal information. This data can be both structured, semi-structured, and unstructured in nature. Now what do you understand by structured data? Something which is done in a structural format. Data that is easiest to search and organize because it is usually contained in rows and columns. So whenever you have something structurally made, then it is very easy to browse through them. For example, when you look at the Excel spreadsheet, you can browse through it easily. So that is what they are talking about, variety. And that is something which you can browse because the variety is structured. Now what do you understand by unstructured data? When we're talking about unstructured data, data cannot be contained in a row column. So lack of structure. There is no structure. When you're talking about unstructured data, it is just random data which is compiled, but you cannot browse through it or search through it. Now we have semi-structured data. What do you mean by semi? Semi always means that it is partially structured and partially not structured. So it is, you understood. Now we come to what velocity is. Velocity, what do you understand by the word velocity? Velocity means speed. The data must be turned into useful information quickly. So you need the data to be converted into useful information within a span of time, within like quick span of time. You need it to be done on a rapid basis and on a quick basis. So velocity is something which the big data is following. So the sheer volume and variety of data makes this task difficult and sophisticated. So you need to high speed in order for it to be efficient in nature. Now what do you understand by value? So what value does the big data provide to the business? What impact, what kind of positive impact it has on the company, and what value can it add? Now we come to the last word, which is veracity. Veracity means it deals about, is the data accurate enough? It checks the accuracy of the data. Is it reliable? Is it accurate? That is what is talked about when we are talking about veracity. Alright, quickly. So what are the 5 V's? Volume, variety, velocity, veracity, and value. Again, volume, veracity, velocity, value, and variety. Now we come to what processing big data is. How do you process big data and how do you manage big data? The ability to manage big data will drive innovation to reduce the time taken. The processing of big data is known as big data analytics. So big data analytics is the process using which you can basically process the big data which is coming in your business. For example, Google Analytics tracks many features of website. Okay, now we come to a very important software, which is Hadoop software. So this is something in context of the UK. Keep this in your mind. Hadoop. Hadoop software allows the processing of large data by utilizing multiple servers simultaneously. Hadoop software. Big data and management accountancy. So how does the big data help management accountants? Think about it for a second. Big data is relevant to a management accountancy in a number of ways, such as it can help the organization understand its customers' needs and preferences. So we will be able to understand the customers' needs and preferences. Then this data or this information can help us improve marketing and sales, right? It can improve forecasting. For example, our future customer spending or of machine replacement cycles. It can help to automate business processes. It can help in detailed, relevant, and up to date PM. What is PM? It is performance management. So these are the ways in which big data can be used by the management accountants. Now let's see some of the most crucial examples how big data is used. Consumer facing organizations. So you know how consumer facing organizations use the big data. Manufacturing companies to predict the optimal replacement cycle of their things, right? Financial services can use customer base and whatever. Politicians use it for their campaigning. Humanitarian agencies like the UN use it to, they use the phone data, location data, and everything using the relief operations, and they use it for the epidemics and diseases. Okay. Okay, now if you think about the USP's delivery vehicles are equipped with sensors. So Tesco has sophisticated sensors installed. So now these are some of the this is not USP, I'm sorry, this is UPSs. So these are some of the examples of where big data is actually being used. Now when you think about Netflix, whenever you stop watching Netflix sends you a notification that, hi, we think you might be interested in watching this. We think you might like this based on your history. So Netflix also uses the big data. and it gives you recommendations based on your past preferences. Now let's quickly check we'll come to test your understanding 6, but before that let's do the risks. Now we have been discussing the advantages of big data, but let's just quickly go on and check what the disadvantages of big data really are. So what are the limitations which it has? The availability of skills to use big data systems, which is compounded by the fact that many of the systems are developing and increasing need to combine. Okay, so availability of skills. You need a particular skill in order to check with the big data analytics. Security of data. So now this is a very big problem that we don't know how secure our data is, because it is getting stored and everything, but we don't know who is having access to our data. Important to recognize. So there is a risk that valuable time is spent measuring relationships that have no organizational value. So now there a lot of time is wasted to get certain information which might not actually have an impact on our business. Incorrect data. So sometimes veracity is a problem, right? Then we can have some technical difficulties. Not everyone is a technical, you know, person. The cost. So whenever you have to have a big data analytics system, obviously it is going to be expensive and costly in nature. Okay, so that's about it. Let's just quickly see the last test your understanding also. Okay, test your understanding 6. MC is a mobile phone network provider offering mobile phones and services on a range of different tariffs to customers across Europe. The company enjoyed financial success until 3 years ago, but increasing competitor pressure has led to a recent decline in sales. There are also have been an increase in the level of complaints. Okay, I think you can do this by yourself. Big data can be used in various formats. How will big data help in this company? This is not going to be tested, obviously, but still just see it. Now we have all solutions with big data. Okay, so that's it. We are done with our chapter. I hope you understood the chapter, and I know that it was a little bit theoretical and boring, but we had to complete it. So, in the next chapter, we'll be doing the further chapters. If you want to solve the Kaplan exam kit, or if you would like to study the other chapters, I've linked both the playlists in the description box below. Thank you.